evening, everyone. This is the last of the fall 2012 Holloway readings. The whole season has been dedicated to featuring poets from Ireland, Scotland, and England. Tonight is a kind of extra special event featuring two of England's most important poets, Keston Sutherland and John Wilkinson. And we're also lucky to have still here in the audience, in preparation for tomorrow's event, Tony Lopez, who read here on Tuesday. And I know a number of you were at that reading too. A word about tomorrow, and then a word about tonight, and then we'll start. For those of you who don't know about it, which I hope is almost no one, tomorrow is a day-long colloquium on boundless poetics, by which term or pair of terms we mean whatever we'll figure out tomorrow. It will be 3 sessions, beginning at 10 a.m. There'll be the usual introduction, and then first session from 10:30 to noon, second from 2 to 3:30, and the third from 4 to 5:30. There will be no presented papers. It's going to be a in situ, live, impromptu, and let's hope intelligent conversation around issues in poetics and practice as we're coping with it currently in England, Scotland, Ireland, and the United States. So it's open to the public, free. So any of you who are free in public should feel invited, as well as all of you who are part of the Berkeley student and faculty and staff and worker community. Today's reading is going to start, we're going to start with Keston Sutherland, and he's going to be introduced by someone with whom he's been working over email and electronically for some time, but only just met a few days ago, and until about 5 minutes didn't know he was going to do the introduction. And that is my friend Jeffrey G. O'Brien. If he doesn't do a brilliant job, it's our fault for not warning him until 5 minutes ago. If he does do a brilliant job, it will just underscore what most of you already knew, which is that he's brilliant. After Jeffrey's introduction, Keston will read, and then Maud Emerson, who is a scholar in the English department, currently working on her PhD, will introduce John Wilkinson, who just flew in last night, so he's probably a little more weary than the rest of us. Okay, so Jeffrey.
So yeah, hi. Has an asterisk ever actually relieved somebody of pressure? I don't think so. So it is my pleasure to welcome and keep welcoming Keston Sutherland and John Wilkinson just now. I think it's only fitting that I need to spontaneously deliver something right before we hear Keston read from his current project, The Odes, because it's a project in which he's tasked himself with a kind of ruinous relation to the enduring substance of the text, insofar as he required of himself that he would perpetually revise the work until the advent of its publication, which means that even those parts of it with which he is at one point pleased become, if not moments of subsequent displeasure, irritabilities or opportunities for further consideration and self-erasure. Thus, if this is a terrible introduction, you can just erase it and I'll come and give another one tomorrow. But his local set of laws by which he's constrained himself in the Odes, although they're adamantly local and about redrawing the local again and again, also speak to a kind of continuity across a lot of Keston's poetic work and critical work. I'm thinking particularly about an essay he wrote about Wordsworth's revisions in the Prelude, and a kind of concept he calls radical doubt, in which often the presence of the revised and therefore sort of erased or abnegated term is still there in the manuscripts with simply a strike through it. So there's the presence of the past of the poem alongside of and interacting with whatever he thought was better by thinking better of what he had had before. And I think that that moment in Wordsworth is a kind of concise emblem of Keston's relationship to his own work, both within works and across works. In other words, I think he has a tremendous faith in poetry as a technology by which you could do something ruinous to the social self and the physical body that most of the rest of the time you're wearing. But he thinks that that ruination itself has to change from work to work. Otherwise, it would congeal into a signature, a fetish, a reification. So we can say that he has a faith in poetry as a way of producing a strike-through of the author capable of launching, at least initially, the poetry, but that strike-through has to redraw and it has to look differently, even though I don't think Microsoft Word has a way for us to produce different strike-throughs. But each of those strike-throughs that looks the same is actually different. So there's a continuity, if there's any continuity, it's in the faith of poetry to ruin itself such that it could actually efficiently do something other than deliver self. I know that Keston was actually revising today in a cafe in Berkeley. So there's never been the Keston who wrote this poetry before, and there's never been the version of this work ever before. And so I will now step out of the way and let you hear it.
Thanks, Jeffrey. That was a improbably brilliant and spontaneous introduction. That's right. That's what I've tried to do, at least. This is new for tonight, this text. So I've been tinkering and fiddling around with it, chopping and inserting for much of today. So I'll see how it's possible to stand by whatever I find right here. This is only a very recent practice, first begun with this project. So it's not, I haven't in this way quite been interested in revision before beginning work on this present project. It was, I suppose, partly a theoretically informed choice, but more than that, just thinking that whatever I was doing was no good, to be honest. That's where it starts from. Anyhow, the project is called Odes to TL61P, and just as someone very distrustful of opacity, as you'll be able to see in just a moment, I'll explain to you just what that means and what this is. So TL61P is the product ordering code for a now obsolete tumble dryer replacement door mechanism, which was once built by the company Hotpoint, but not anymore, and that's where the kind of elegiacal working bit comes in, I suppose. Anyhow, I'm going to read just one of these. There are 5 of them. I'm going to read the first one, Ode to TL61P. But I'm going also to do something slightly new, at least new for me tonight. I'm going to insert into it 2 little bits, one from Ode 2 and one from Ode 4, to see whether the parts of these poems really are freely transposable and whether there might be a grammar in them which isn't yet disclosed, and I can shift bit to bit. We'll see. Anyhow, I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks so much to Lynn and everyone for inviting me, and I'll give it a go, and I guess this will take about 35 minutes or so. Ode to TL61P1. Each time you unscrew your head, the truths burn out and fly away above the stack of basements inundated in aboriginal mucus, lifting the impeccably hairless but hereafter congenitally depilated Janine like a tender blank up on the oblong freezer lid whose shut white top, hinged at the back, protects a pyramid of frigid meat, pizzas, Viennetta, or prophylactic void torn into great crates of glittering eyeshadow. For no one is the radius of everything we are, by reason of innately shattered strobes relit as soon burnt out, ramming an unplanned crack into the door mechanism. Who the fuck I am speaking to, or at or for this moment, is compensation for being completed into a circle resigned to resume this first square, the first on our entire board, and is listening there, afloat and spent and lost in the opening night whose primitively explosive starlight is progressively nitpicked from an impatient and fidgeting sky, far too far and far too fast, all but too inquisitively squinted at, its cartilage of lubed-up sex arc scraped out piecemeal and in single file, and once there, inaudibly ask yourself, why? Inside it is the fundamental fact. The abolition of capital is the social revolution. State again this single fact, in too deep for any scar. Repeat. In the end, which is right now, looming over a motto executed in the Ottoman style of the Rococo circumlocution in liberal sex jargon, recited by Hervé Fil at Act 2, Scene 1, lines 477 to 508, in the dreamiest mannequin's subsequent scan of which smudged erotic jottings allege to a scratched-out holographic ear the improbable but ugly double-stranded far end of the primitive primary street canal bound in stratified squamous epithelium to an alternatively screaming mouth, destined while dying inside to repeat before dying outside, one last infinity of one-liners before abruptly just giving up once you get it. Once you really get it all the more original the way there is to improvise, directly into the hot squamo-columnar junction with its intestate teat cistern, a photocopy blurred into alienating aleatory poésie concrète by being roughly swiped back and forth over the scratched platinum glass of the Canon MF8180C or Brother DCP 9045 CDN, all-in-one fax, printer and copier of the incomplete catechism that stubs out the abrupt Shelley's Triumph of Life, later trimmed to talking points under the table, propped up at right angles, folded until we froth, to triple its unaccountability to an afflatus, doing as the banks just did, not as the banks just said. I understand the hole that George is in, a dot whose innuendo comes too late, flush with spirit, bring shit back to life, not alone in lasciviously reconceptualizing we are alone, but sucking on the aging, raging hard-on held in trust for young dysphagia who only comes of age. Yes, exactly, but at the same time, or at some other time like it, or at what is not a time but is still like it, or at what is not a time and is not like it, or not at least like this one, or not at least like yours, or in an unsustainable combination of the above to be faked to death every day for the good of creamy, cash-rich men whose sexuality is literalized into a rampage of leverage and default swaps, hovering above minimum wage like a bloodthirsty erection over a fairground mirror, neatly warped and folded and inspected from on high above with seething and with licking, to want to absolutely spit you out, whose incessant re-entry is the background music still more popular than real because forever liable to be rewound, rammed again and again into the gaping ingrown ears of outgrown human sex toys, gated off, ground down and blown up to do anything you can think you will do and then do what you think, or else fear you will do and then do what you fear or would rather not do but nonetheless do, or only die wishing you had already done or never had, grinding a fickle reality out, a kind of backlit soft porn nativity scene constructed out of Versican, fudge icing and nail clippers. To prove the point of passion is immutable as fire strips, this is conducive to heat and does not require frequent cleaning, saving time, effort and money. Second, the pipe is a sheet metal processing product. The advantages of uniform thickness is unparalleled or inimitable as in for money right up to the two-speed marital Martinamis. One speed, once you know the ropes of growing insensitive, gaining the hill, from which a further speed is deducted for every emergent callus, until at the crux, when finally you give up ramming it because it has no point, it has minus a trillion preset speed, shoots a mawkish, Moorish seed, basting shit and sugar-coating nil, whose real name is a liberal anagram for amniotic trim, not for TL61P, or the reverse on principle, to which the self-same letters cling in blanket terror of being peeled off by a ridgy, sexy acrylic fingernail, later filed to oblivion through the eye of whose cameo done in grisly nitrocellulose of your mother in the late style of the permanently born yesterday Francis Bacon, dissembling his tantrum to dead meat bunged in oil in an overhead Tefal maxi fry, inanely overheated to open the end up half empty of Fair and Lovely, a single, infinitesimal, silver-plated, tiny ring slowly and invisibly spins, summoning in all the cast the obligation to remain within it. Latterly, as a cortege, our magic antennae screw to our antic macrame, an opening in the opening night, savaged by the light it marginalizes. But before anyone could actually get hard or wet or both at once on leading members of that cast, led role models for our past, who beg to differ, slave to eat, the mess we inherited from the last orgasm in government for sexy workers whipped to slurp the surplus spew of petty change remaindered when the banks have had their due. Their, in any case, very eccentric final countdown, redacted to a catchphrase for obsolescence per pro oral compliance, with a takeover speculation boosting autonomy core 5.3% after better than estimated earnings forecasts at Oracle Core. Our flat back teeth drilled in a new international tax regime protologisms, refuting enamel, chipping into Tesco, scorning accessibility, adrift in gum, virtual for real, adages on bandages, paper cuts in water damage, implants of the daily grind, children out the almost real and almost shut, but not decisively shut yet, and still shatterproof, smeary and eternally not real windows sing, the mess we inherited from the last beginning scraps the missing past to recycle the joy it brings, the power set of a subset of a power set of a sex power, suburbanings of backstreet over Bollywood in flower. For the first time since you not only die at all, since how could you not? Biting starts too late, sucking is original, is already there, free with age. Grab a plastic sheet full of milk to toss out the shut door and catch it. TL61P, infix and feed the flame it sparks, to burn how it matters. Strict instruction voided blank to prime the end for drying to a glare. Bright rivets on the profound water, and under the water, the reason it's there. Von Feuer der Arbeit beleckt, to come a random liquid tripwire, a head's tufts caressed ash, knotted to Iraqi satisfaction. By the fire of labour, dead debt rips out prank alien loins. This way up, to any moon you like. The back of your first lover pressed in your groin. But if life will keep its grip in there, since not exhausted from without, a light dissolves to rip and shine again, was all I am. Plating the air humans exhale in that window I flex in dark. To take the point, not ready yet to give you back, but adamant by idiotic mantras to earn the reason for love's apparent deterrence so long after you. My blood races, I can't pull out. Who are not available, led in there to have the life you get too close, to be the slanting bed, too far away to make you up or lose you in. Go under me and stare at the same thing apart. Our glaring end annuls in light what fire on the faded past remains, whose shadow cannot last. As you burn away in bright and widespread too ecstatic loss, everywhere bends the eyes, back on the slow infinity that blocks the love it fits across. Just as, rehoused at random, love itself puts up its opposites, cut down to make the point it is not wasted in the end to prove. In Mexico, the problem has another dimension, owing to the drug cartels and the human cost of their iconicity, much of it dialectical and in women. There, they throw sackfuls of decapitated heads all over the disco floor. Just skidding on it like a male child is naive, but kicking them around is, if anything, worse. At that point, everything is deeply interfused. Even the congealed, invisible, virtual, abstract, spectral, projected white blood cells rushing barely at trace levels to the head of the snowest nail ever hammered in itch curia into a pineapple, a wrist, silence, or into the base of the hammer itself, a pat plastic simile for a slapdash splintering spine, thinking cheap as dirt and free as verse. Prometheus was a misogynist. Its testimony is the unbearable faintness of its odour in your heart, this blood that is beginning everywhere. But the present catastrophe, lines 485 to 6, rebrands Felix Gallardo as the primary object, locked up ladder to elite sublimities, so that, strutting in golden ringlets, streaked with ashen highlights on the sexual proscenium at the boundary of significance, we may know him, his too hot crotch in knots of living weasel gut, whispering only just to love. If it's not interesting to read, then what's the point in doing it? Or living as though you have to, defined by an obligation with no fulfillment, lapsing to prognosis of a soap aisle. I start my investigation here, taking my life in my hand. Life rises to greet me, boasting its ardency in the carotid. From O to TL61P2, section 2. As sure as any air must spread the cost of any breathing head, thrilled out to cold perfection, released from its protection, to keep our estimates so rough that each can lean in close enough to bind onto the other, free and blind to her obscurity, so every paralysis condemns to cost analysis, terminable or not, the same live instrument of breath and blame. The high demand is prod the spec to check its balance on the neck, restructured not to bend or turn or lose what might be saved, to earn a personal account of how, in love with what it can't allow either to be or disappear, their average becomes more dear, upheld with phony fire to drown desire as the blood slows down, to last forever, missing out as mirrored in the late bailout, or ever wash away the smear of values, else in sight too clear to stare in lucid vanity, transfixed to our insanity, whose stalk is knotted on a nail of sex smashed in too deep to fail, or go for just as long as wait or last the whole life wrong, too late but soft enough to trim the lips, no kiss too infinitely grips, since sadly being shoved away is what makes yesterday, today, disprove tomorrow, shining more robust than ever on the floor, as managers are first to know by shadowing the afterglow that blurs as irrepressible desire or inaccessible is thrust hard at a new mock dot whose proxy for the vacant cot, assigned its pun in Eliot, is packed in silica crystals to desiccate essentials for bare minds wintering in jars of skulls bust in from empty bars, rebutting dusters in a fridge, not plugged in, a dismantled bridge, but switched on at the wall, and shut in protest at the power cut, impatient for pneumatic joy, since emptying that girl or boy on tips of absence getting hard to drink in yards of cooling lard, in envy of their hotter love, of all our suffering above the hot point silex scintillans, the bright spark libertarians, who lisp over the drone sublime, get high on gore and moral rhyme, and scheme on ideal felonies and bogart hash on balconies to level all disparities, in passion only once as fuck so flashy bankers snore amok, who split apart in bliss to ply the sexy shrapnel, satisfy the universal appetite for more orgasmic natural right, whose aspic and preservatives sustain neoconservatives to scavenge under God in blood and liberate his wavy flood. Januzzi, UKHL5 will keep the flagging law alive, cement forever wet in dreams of Tigris, disemboguing streams of bonded revenue and dust, shored up with picturesque disgust by poets mindfully concussed, the more content, the less unheard, as vision sways its best when blurred, suffice to say, and get ignored, like genitals too hard and bored. For all the time you wait and break or mend to die will only make the memory of difficult, passionate love still more occult, and tender faces disappear as lost mist leaves the mirror clear to vanish, yet permanently diminish, not so passingly as love must in a slighted head, shut up in dreams, admired instead of shed like jobs to multiply, the way out by the inward cry, for fleecy care or finny drove, or feathered youth, or all my love, or scaly breed, since with that shit Iraq in general must grit its icy core of heart and mind in not just spectral abstract rind, but profit for the vested rim, who mass produce the phantom limb, rip open markets in despair, mock cannibals who bite the air, rinse spit and flush their sacred founts, and whine about the body counts. Ode to TL61P1, 1.2. Dusters wrapped in itching flames, streaked in limbic cloud, in liching. 6. Blue sky on the setting water, nod till, made too still, remade in onward chains. T. Looking out the plane window at the feathergrass and spiders. The 3. P. Bears, a triangle dumped in the oil prisoner head left. Who knows if what I'm thinking is this or worse? Dispersing the riot in smoke like love in conscience. The use value of a thing does not concern its seller as such, but only its buyer. In which case, use values are exclusive to consumers. And consumers are, in that case, the blinky, pinky, inky and Clyde of the way of despair squared. So that, as our art is increasingly sold, and love is, and there are many more sellers, many of them good sellers, its use value, as what the Nigerians call a supernumerary proportion of its total combined value, including its exchange, goes into improbable dramatic decline, like Chekhov. We feel this as consumers, not as one, readying ourselves not to, and are forever almost ready, staring at the alien in the 1,000 eyes it blinks, making up for consciousness with all the shit it thinks. Move your arms around, doing work. Click to the melody under your nails. Nothing changes this into a specimen of forever. Very quickly, but quiet as impatience spreads down the shoulder into the thin end of the teeth, the wind will brush the edge like water cracked apart. Exposure for exhibitionist brains, plated with very heaven. AWM 6140/3, allegations, water on the genitals, sisters in photographs, belt tightening, electric dreams, speaking starts distractedly. The game has no ending. As long as the player keeps at least one life, he or she should be able to continue playing indefinitely. This is rendered impossible by a bug. You task Madiha Shenshel with cooking your breakfast, hawk eggs in fried milk, high in polycollaterals, then finishing it, then making it again, then finishing it, then making it again. Fuck, a dot. Automatically spitting shells out. You prefer the boxes to the toys. Deborah's photo of herself crammed into her college wardrobe ad infinitum. The hair on 1,000 mothers, infinity ad nauseum. The internal level counter is stored in a single byte, and when it reaches 255, the subroutine causes this value to roll over to 0 before drawing the fruit. This causes the routine to draw 256 fruits, or wish to, which corrupts the bottom half of the screen and the whole right half of the maze with seemingly random symbols, making it unwinnable. But reality is not at the bottom of the abyss. The abyss is, in time, just reality being itself, at least to begin with, and, at the same time, conclusively, as if contracted, soft, to a single point, a dot, at the end of the universe, when dark matter is a distant memory, subject for our chastisement to the fluctuations of paramilitary nostalgia in her foot. And I am not sure to go on, or how to, or even what that name is anymore. Whoever you are, I do this for. Person, this, human, this window for this crack, or even if I do it, and probably I don't, the strings on 1,000 dolls. Relief at Abu Naji, I cite its adaptation on Bliss in memory. Retread via Danny Boy to the Drool Igloo. Pseudo TL61P, atom juice, disqualified for living. Cleared, the fruits and intermissions would restart. Anemia fade. This the possibility. This the price of bread in 1792. This Mariana asleep in bed in a bean sprout bound in spattered marble, staring at the skin next to your eye. Free of that universe. Mimetic of a smudged cherry. Traherne. Love is deeper than at first it can be, thought. And the extra will last you past care to a better joke about you drilled through to infiltrate the gothic froth of Hellman. From OTTR 61P4, section 1.1. The coinage of paedophilia is attributed by the Oxford English Dictionary to Havelock Ellis, who in his Studies in the Psychology of Sex, whose first volume begins with a study on the evolution of modesty, classified the sexual love of post-pubescent individuals for prepubescent individuals as an abnormality. We embrace the new ideology. Since those first beginnings, in what innumerable psychoanalytically inclined thinkers confined to the humanities can now conceptualize as the pathologization of too durable infant desire, keeping up childhood for too long, our machinery of classification has been melodiously refined. Besides paedophilia, which now means the sexual love of prepubescent individuals in particular, we now have hebephilia, a diagnosis for the sexual love of individuals in the early stages of puberty, but not earlier. Ephebophilia, a diagnosis for the sexual love of individuals lately progressed out of puberty. These last two are sometimes also called chorophilia and parthenophilia. Teleophilia, a diagnosis for the sexual love of adult individuals, whom we mirror. And gerontophilia, or gryophilia, a diagnosis for the sexual love of elderly individuals. These diagnoses are in turn the subdivisory disorders of chronophilia, a more general term for any limitation of sexual love to individuals living within fixed age limits. Chronophilia is in turn a paraphilia, a yet more general term, familiarly of biomedical application, that describes the misdirection of sexual love as a whole, be it into babies or non-human objects or images of suffering or corpses. It will be obvious that the history of diagnostic refinement in pathologization is at least nominally a case of clinical Hellenism. Hellenism is itself a word adapted out of its original meaning, which was, quote, the acknowledging and adoring of a multitude of gods, end quote, to fit the less immoderately orgiastic definition, quote, Greekism, end quote, in thought or speech. The criminal use of desire would be very grating in Kurdish. But all sex is barbaric. We are the pleasures we enjoy, the blisses we admire. And all sex is a text, wingbacks in a gaping slang. I adopt Hazlitt's position on the immortality ode because my mother was an alcoholic. Freud said that my early biological hermaphrodism led to my original predisposition to bisexuality, which in the course of my development was reduced to monosexuality, leaving slight remnants of the stunted sex. The idea of development truly is a formidably legitimate, and yet it is only the first of many ideas, each one more legitimate than the next. My infancy was an original predisposition to sexual love for children, which over the course of our development was reduced to sexual love for teenagers, and then, as if conclusively, to the same for adults. The elderly are terminally attractive, but I would rather not suck them. Infant love is as durable as life. If it isn't, it must be. Immortality must mean the preterition of aging, so that universal love may be comprehensive, that is, pedo hebe ephebo teleiophiliac, omitting the elderly, who are ostentatiously not immortal. The sum of all disorders is the law of paradise. You can disagree with it, but you can't disobey it. That's the bottom line. Ode to Theosophists 1p1. But really to believe that necessity is exhausted if it comes, making haste to apologise for its premature infantilism by a great clumsy show of increase in salivation flow, once best left alone, not otherwise, by going on longer, the point itself will still be around, is a joke. Embryo smut in the possible taste. Since you get from A to B, take your time returning. Isn't it the problem that I want you to stare at me until our eyes trade sockets, trailing visions, fucking our mutual brains out all over the wrongest floor? Not the implication that hooding was banned in 1972 that asked for an adaptation on bliss in memory, light, sockets, the halo pinned to bodies in remorse, devoured in a shadow life sends back. Remember this, I sought through the boxes. My first poems are there. The drawings I made at school are, and my toys are, lead prodigies and barbarians, paints for them, tapes of my rock band, some vinyl of Tchaikovsky and Bach, the present photographs of my first sexual lover, whose face is staring with intent euphoria and deepening tenderness at the face I was, the eyes I shone in then. The light in them blinds me now to nothing less than under your caress I can do still, and do still even right now, or very soon do when I climb into bed with you and let my arm shrink into your waking head, or sleeping, however you are in there, that room of objects and that room of you. Construction may routinely be upgraded into life, as Orphic vanity spreads backwards its only motive for the present obscurity. But deafness has an adverse impact on interrogation. Smiling at the lips in oil for food is fast by proxy to an epic patronage. I want, take, scream, stick. You try to replenish the sounds that you hear in your head, regimental amnesia. I saw all the members of the multiple emulate me, unfolded into an illicit epigram I now laterally hyperventilate. One line with a joke end at the end, backing inspiration, breathing parega of children and plangent dill. Ties it together, asks the retracting, acting like voids, downed in ears, a fire on, lick me, you on this line when you don't expect it when you do this line. It has a rim you take out to the bottom of the floor, big enough to remand your first genitals. The rim is rectangular as any surat, to forever ruin, the way you wait, I'll be here forever. A winding sheet of shining eyes slammed to annihilation. Nothing we did could get him to open the door. The roof was coming down. He's driving us somewhere, but where? The light fits like a door kicked in, the head on a shoestring, right to do its worst and make the best of you. At the back to be alone, so that in the wet graphics spraying out the spoils of the grave, a dead friend in shreds gladly climbs, and with growling stomach and powdered flower roots to snort in dust, steps on the podium of odium to trill this elegy. I have a dream of every man I ate in all my life, and after that refreshment no zombie can pick his teeth, but better learn to live with what he's got and what he's not, and make both tolerances perfectible. There's no way in as you defer to that, this way back from rejecting it to see. Repeat yourself after me. Repeat it yourself after me. Repeat yourself at me. I am at alone in all the world, a mirror forfeit to beauty. The love I am is anything what I live for, skin and looking at you dead now, but like it your breath, still sharp at the flesh of desiring we ran out from, liquid across the floor they tore down years ago, live in your hand, my face, a stick of empty fingertips. The code TL61P belongs to a hot point dryer. You'll find out nothing if you look it up through the sky in the screen. The vault of exchangeable passion, vertigo at the horizon, prostrate as an outstretched cheek, but in the mouth that grows, incapacity behind that overflow. Nobody can take away the word for it. Love, the provisional end until death. TL61P, its unconditional perfected shadow opposite. Now go back to the start. Thanks.
I feel like any introduction is going to sound incredibly stodgy after that, so apologies to John Wilkinson. John Wilkinson has been a poet, he tells us, since his teenage years. As a student at Cambridge in 1974, he won the Chancellor's Medal for Poetry, an award whose past recipients include the young Alfred Tennyson. He's currently a professor of practice of the arts at the University of Chicago. But between that moment and this, his path veered well away from the academy. According to his publisher's website, his working life has taken him through psychiatric nursing and social work in the West Midlands, developing supported housing, teaching community care and mental health studies in Swansea, commissioning mental health services for the East End of London, and executive posts in public health and mental health strategic planning. I think this is an even more exciting set of credentials for a poet than Wilkinson's academic honors, but to be thorough, I'll also mention that he has been a Frank Knox Fellow at Harvard University and Carl and Lily Pforzheimer Fellow at the National Humanities Center. John Wilkinson is the author of numerous books of poetry. Recent titles from Salt Publishing include Down to Earth, published in 2008, Lakeshore Drive, 2006, and reissues of his intensely beautiful 1986 volume Proud Flesh and 1994's Flung Clear, Poems in 6 Books. Salt also published a collection of his critical prose in 2007 entitled The Lyric Touch, Essays on the Poetry of Excess. His newest book, Reckitt's Blue, is forthcoming from Seagull Books. Since Wilkinson is married to the literary scholar Maud Ellman, we hope he feels at home here in the Maud Fife room with an introduction by yet another Maud. My first introduction to John Wilkinson was an essay he wrote about bathos and loveliness in the poetry of James Schuyler. The essay treats Schuyler's poetry with such an admiring sympathy that I was surprised on turning to Wilkinson's poetry to find it so manifestly unlike Schuyler's. Wilkinson writes lovingly of Schuyler's indolence, but his own poetry is densely, even violently energetic. His lines are at once more eloquent and more radically disjunctive than Schuyler's, And where Schuyler's aesthetic plays on the slightness of 1- and 2-syllable words, Wilkinson's poems betray an almost frightening knowledge of the deep tracks of the dictionary. As I grow more familiar with Wilkinson's poetry, though, there are a few points of affinity with Schuyler that have come to appear more fundamental than the differences. The abstractness and difficulty of Proud Flesh, which Wilkinson has described as a love poem, are actually a kind of gentleness, a reluctance to handle the other too roughly in words. One short poem from the long sequence declares, "X marks your hinterness with a foxed stare, where love crushes silverbacks to splinters and looking glass goes clear." Meanwhile, the poems in Wilkinson's more recent volume, Down to Earth, suggest another Schuyler. This one, the poet looking out for hours at the view from his apartment on 49th Street, taking in the neighboring rooftops, the East River, the UN building, and the slow changes worked between them by the ceaseless shiftings of weather and light. Wilkinson's observations are harder edged and charged with political urgency, but still, it takes a Schuyler-esque patience and attentiveness to grasp the large-scale economies operating around and through us. Down beats gold on gray panels, down beats the hot gospel, writes Wilkinson in the long poem, Like Substances. Up the squanderer surges. Or from the Indiana toll, up from thoughtful earth, the map of undertakings, surface ghosts whose subterranean bodies fling out spores. Since their depths look plausibly like height put on, how say you blind and scurf would wrinkled sleeve puff up like gelatin, a blue January atmosphere, the night's flats distend and fill with stormy flickers, pavement quilts, blacktop bulges, and its presences wreathe inky pumice in fine spray or steam wisps. This is actually one of the more tranquil passages in Down to Earth, a book that unsettles us with the recognition that the dystopic environment it describes is the one in which we currently reside. As a voice asks in the poem, like feeling, where are you luring me, if not into your home? There's one last thing I want to say about Wilkinson's poetry, and on this point, his writings about other poets are instructive. In Schuyler, he identifies a unique handling of bathos that resists both the sublime and the depths of extremity. There's Wilkinson's Frank O'Hara, whose odes comprise a struggle to memorialize without marmorializing. And of John Wiener's, he writes, there's a pulse in his arresting lyric poetry between a linguistic productivity with its straining away from object perception and a reintegrative movement which returns to the situated identity in the body. The hypertensiveness is registered in a language breathing and physical, which must stay close to the rhythm of exchange in order to not buckle into self-referential incoherence and extreme attention to its own processes, which would yield to madness. The poets Wilkinson admires perform balancing acts, taking nothing for granted, questioning their own impulses at every turn. The same can be said of John Wilkinson, particularly in his relation to the lyric. He's equally alive to lyric's possibilities as to its impossibility. Minotaur of Admittance reads the last stanza of a poem called The Cold Day of Light. But you best watch, these threads might become you almost. Wilkinson's poetry is always wary of the risk that the threads that it dawns, the threads that it follows, might be too becoming. I'm very pleased to welcome the poet John Wilkinson.
Thank you so much for that very thoughtful introduction. And thank you for inviting me here and for allowing me to participate in tomorrow's event as well, which I look forward to greatly. This evening I'm going to read two poems, a long poem and a short poem. The long poem began with a few lines written in response to Peter Sellers' staging of Handel's opera Hercules, set in Guantanamo Bay. I was then impelled to think about how I might be able to handle with the same intensity, effective intensity, the abstractions which surface with such violence in that work and in its staging, particularly around the word liberty. But as I worked on these abstractions, I became increasingly haunted by a return of my adolescent fascination with Buddhist wisdom literature and with the idea of emptiness. And this long poem began to become preoccupied with emptiness, but as I developed it, I was visited with a kind of loss I could not have anticipated, and which the poem has struggled very hard to manage. I'd imagined that I would finish this poem for today. I've been hoping to finish this poem for today, and that I will be released from its trammels. Its name is Courses Matter Woven, and it has an epigraph from Keats. The poem is in 10 parts, and 8 of them are in much the same stanza. There are 2 incursions of more spontaneous writing. And the epigraph is: unhaunted quite of all but nothingness. Before nothingness there is a dash, and after nothingness there is a question mark. So this is a concatenation of doubts and of negations that I can barely begin to think my way through. So, Courses Matter Woven, 1. Pressing emptiness can't adapt to scurryings not audible. Stopped down mutely to the clay, stern vision buoys up still, through cushions and through influx, a windsock prolapsed in bronze. Peewit calls a dipping, dotted course. Shining binds the instrument, analysis is on a hiding, don't start to think otherwise, cardboard and tape measures brought for a maquette. Nonetheless, a shuffle deck of feelings slips from cartoon parameters, each from each quietly. Persons run ragged for a stroke, careens just then and there as though it swung against, face forward, swelling it with what boded ill beneath the flyover in the stall beneath straw. Emaciated palm tree ribs, jutting hips, simultaneously these expand and organs hang from them. Human brain even. What activity can be detected in these? Values on cocotte. Whispers also that everyone agrees they ride on the ability to ruffle edges whether stuck down or gently nodding. Ruffled blue tissue awaits its fruit. Ruffled petals spill their scent, awaiting moth's signature. Until light interrupts. Lathe cuts a pattern with its shine and slick. Figures out vestigial inwardness. Till a notched tape pinches a balloon to get a reading. That inflicts welts. Invisible respondents pluck and prod, harrying a vision of humanity, drawing blood that stains oilily the lacquer dogs slither over, dogs are bound and won't be whipped in. Rotates in its collar, liberty, sweet liberty. At this the seas roar and the votive gulls hung by threads pitch sickeningly, even as the broken pack is drawn off by a smell of meat, mills about within its new, restored form. In the collar, in the gimbal, spins the human chassis, limbs outstretched and excruciated in the warp ends of longitude and latitude, picked off from her fingertips, casting bird coverlets and aeroplanes on predatory mission, rigged for their remote destinations, brought about. But she now shrinks within our sights, but she forms the upside or the downside. Birds line up again to test the waters, sipping at foam. So she is assembled by numbers. She kneels in her bracket, further bracketed in echoes. Scurryings and scratches fade, even when the crick throat, gripped in calipers, gasps across its casing a dashed-off profile moiety, while her flip upholds a scentless spray of cowslips. Either or compounds the real, but what does her cheek press? Sung performances fail to disarray the orange suit or disintegrate the Kevlar before the invisible audience dropping in on this tableau. 2. Smuts are they or moths, flagging over bright instruments, flopped about blood and piss threads. Late drunken shouts impanel emptiness's swell. Close to form, moths hesitate, holding pattern, proof against a trained shout, squeak of a style. Colourfully interspersed, accepting white and fawn spontaneities. Bloom not made for store brings them out of themselves. Responding where each wing set of dust whose hieroglyph aggressively putting out clash of clash of clash, you want it, clash of clash of clash, beyond the gate, the monitor. Who am I, a gatekeeper running backwards through gates and slamming them into your face? Slap, slap, applicator. This here, which hereinafter, wrenches stamens loose from the orbits of encompassing, point by point in agreement, disfiguring stops and pinning charts, till they align she carved thee for her seal. Functions restore and dibble, earth beneath its frost brocade. The traces of thought stir in real-time display. Their flutter musses leaves endearingly while stripping off chronic bark. What batters at the door? What compounds the offence? Nothing presses with inverted polarity. Nothing here breaks my neck. Exposing a balloon, a squelched condom. Vivid view, undo, back of the head. Hoverflies zoom in on flowers they select as moths feast upon theirs, along with timing similarly. Each at its wildflower, trackside escapee, or self-copulating cultivar, riffles through a seed box blackened like a casket, swathed in bloom. A rose imbued despondent on a lattice, cups what flies its way, the eye in it hooks light and is torn. Liberty slashes like a vernal or shot heath. Leave edges unfinished, impossible to bring flush, squeezed back in two minds but close. Office hours screw cap, per fricked business practices and deep dyed, pollen filtering regardless of season or of source. Cutting edge immobilizer licks out the only one I cherish. How can nothing in itself be cancelled? Hold and lock gains a firmer grip on emptiness. Emptiness condenses in her presence, gulping its presence. 3. Push here. Pink rose, reset, reset. Too much give saturates the button over eager to engage. Heather millions think wafting warm air, unbounded while its filmy bag breechless, will pay court to a garden true to their cast of mind, as though lobbed into mind its fruits will evermore befall. There is no place like no place blanks. Before this null the tull folds in on itself. When nullity is tremblingly transpired, a contingency felt, uproar shakes them from the stalks. Stay your axiom, as was a singular world pupped. If so thought, would not turn. Seldom pocket moth broke the sun's stride. Does the sun count its paces? This or that bulk brings about detours of blood and bone, takes the form of space for a moth or an invented right-angled joint, self-presenting in its snug container or in memory foam, cut into privet. So emptiness is shaped. How empty can be the sky, fine fuel droplets, drones beyond description, falling and reflected light, the mirages cut from prescribed cloth and lain obsequiously into the western niches, keep in movement, breaks my neck. Fast as thou wane, she stomps numbers stacked against her, as a must I gatekeeper turn against statistics. How can columned light enfold? Pressure points nail a slew map reference, crook of elbow to one hanging foot arch, decadencing from where it would surpass, tight bend, outline and cold creeps, plantation trapezoids, whose squadrons rotor out to prospect, their shingle thought accounts for the earth. Windows supply liquidity, global view is tendered to its interception, offering its flank as to stroke of blood count. Bounty is suspended temporally. Strike then the knell. Cramp crooks together, hovering in limbed apotheosis. O cobalt coast, O fleet eye, O new arrival, period long decayed, unmoors violet tax, articulated so securing promise ever sweetens the barrens. Welcome, 140 space underground copy die. The converse was not mass but dispersal. Opposites distract. But every noble insect that visits, foreboding the idea of such uplift, tethered like a dirigible on the skyline, ceramic blue before the sunfall turns it cupro-nickel, tugs at the heartstrings dangerously. As a result, the canopy simply turns inside out and the silk ribbing collapses and its tongues bunch marigold. The sun stays, its vapours folding in, foregoing and succeeding sucked. 4. Once you get down to it, you've got to get up. Though wind rattles ill-fitting windows in the warehouses, it even so must consolidate you well wrapped with gales on that headland named previous. While there's scant gap between markers and a melody petering out, that doesn't mean the foot slips the stirrup, nor that the pieces won't fit back in the tin. In fact, they do, but then won't stop swelling. Growth was what we had expected, so not much to complain of there. Poor yearlings piled on the pounds, and even the elderly wouldn't shrink obligingly but overflowed their chair seats. Unions leagued and clubs amalgamated, eyes bulged. A bit unsteadily, I pulled myself together well into place. If you want to stay in one place, then get down. No shelter for the locals or a traveller either, lizard tongues, enormous hands, breasts that topple the mother and crush her brat. We might become unmanageably extended. The grouping hereinafter hunched in a ditch alongside, not to say hands wiping air, crumpled like a vast sky staked by the flaps, corresponding parts fused. It was only once this unity broke they could assemble red-eyed arthritics squatting in their own shit, fiddling with buttons, numbers and timers. Here splintering ends. Contained explosions clear the air, and rage creates a replicable device primed for a passerby. Would it be ill-advised to consort with them in a floaters that expressed my clump causing who knows what interactions? He wipes hands on a grass verge. Notice, he walks over it. 5. No tendency can always continue to float. It crystallizes. Convertist would be more like it. Canada geese used to fly in V-shapes, but directories of them darken skies. Applies to one, the usage, solo. But amongst all individuals, more flocks flock and throngs throng, and this biomass choking the outstretched neck is meanwhile rippled by the glittering chaff that interferes. A great shitstorm hit, exorbitant tranche, aspirators panted, wrathful chromosome. It never skips a beat, the sky erupts, dawn chorus scatters blissful versions. Arcade machines, utilities spit bleeps and pings, flash up fault codes in block numerals. Heedless of much-burdened clouds, bird cages rock and toss in waves as tethered and responding to bungee cords, colour-coded pigeon, jackdaw, woodpecker. These cages keep obedient birds on song. The species sing out of their hymn books by name. Mellifluous passages smooth what needs must be. Storms abate. On basalt shelves in courtyards lined with flocks puffed out in niche groups, whether switched to random or to automatic cycle, heads turn in unity, the programme dumps, spattering outcrops featureless and rude, infesting domes. Reset wing, squelch, reset eye. Jerked forward on conveyors, fledged on set frequency, undisturbed by marsh calls, plucked. Cut a break by star effects, glowing activated, drawing down their stations through bamboo fretwork or via phone mast volleys. Reset, reset, apply its name. Defibrillate, kick-name them so they lurch, splay-winged, nail them to a tessellated door like articles or shuddering like feathergrass or boas, whereat they dip for guidance systems, pass for truth, across the tasked clouds to Morocco, Algiers. Little harbingers crank. Their elastic cords twitch. So far as they go, all in concert, tangled amid chords and discords, dialysis directs them in their visible strains to this or that appointed bourne, that hedge, that thing. And on the thermals they separate, their cries heard by mariners who near the coast, by nomads nearing habitation. Earth glows in pockets, beckoning. Song filaments float above the labourers pressing forward. 6. Just have your footsteps faltering a tactful way off account. Any part is set aside like a meadow drains off pain. 4 hard-boiled eggs rattle in the pan-rep Singapore parody. Liberty, sweet liberty. An orange shell suit hangs from its weighed bow. Conductors with machine guns among the beads at intersections giggle then stiffing faces. Rotating on their podiums, trained along the shadow edge, their eyes alert and empty, skin shadow of stone. The curved leg, the straight leg, the short leg stick out to wiggle, majuscules crawl in strong light. Loud traffic hushes, car transporters shrug off cars on the verge, pits and raw stripes write exercises notarizing bone and joint. Sing it again, liberty, sweet liberty, tuned by season, beleaguered, it of it of it. Footprints of birds in dying concrete, orange leaves skittering, motor-burned fingers who prepares the involute, horror, then relief conforming song as to her contra terrene. So also by its crushed possibilities smell of fire, she shall live forward fiercely, unelsed, unothered. Eggs rattle in a snag-tooth break, concordant reach true temper even as thrust to her knees, it of it of it, in each case a smattering, regardless of the nettle window, it of it of it, despite the collapsed wheat submissions, barley at this altitude, even as the card melts her name raised, in metadata lost between formats she shows ardently. By morning plucked up mist starts to crest. Killer beats diaphragm the walls, they are unremitting. Plausible and tanned, a gatekeeper turns a cheek overwhelmed with shadow, taps out versions of invented instinct, messenger of that amine for the plucking up. This inside, that has inside, courses gathering and splaying, matter woven, it of it of it. Leaves commingle, rucked under birdlime and snails slick the earth. Starved children forage after peg fungi, scrabble through topsoil, scale along creepers down shivered bark, down soft mace. In the scaffold throbs hanging fruit not to harvest. Glowing wait for their format, wait for the messenger to bring red catacol so as to interrupt. It is the dead of day. Commotion stills, all companions lie as though comatose from self. This is a special purpose vehicle, and the future swoops to reattach their tongues. Then they settle down, millions not yet living speak with one voice. The mining companies, truck and day workers, who at first looked like the ideal match, yet sparrows do not fall. It of it of it. 7. Here hangs, here constellates. Suspends a composed leap over a tumulus, emptiness my greeter, pair of shoes. Would you call them eloquent lime splashes, rows of classical busts, soft percussion, bats at glass, pollinators volume the stint strings. Here lays off. Here an event concurs, down gravel paths where privet walls restrict moves. Soft bowls of colour swing on chains, taking their turn to flaunt pimple echo at misspoke perigee. Evacuated forms dangle while their skinliness thins out. Rose petals in a bowl lose all hope of touch. Fingers that visited have closed. A gentle brown creeps from cranks where petals meet, pushes to the fringe their reminiscences of pink. Licking shadow from the rock, zip boots too are banished, reddens either plush button dome or conventicle of red spiders. A former wheel clamper, now himself detained, stares at skies revolving. A former nightclub bouncer comes too. A one-time security officer can handle this, no problems, mineral known as bazarite. And what will coat your fingers? Hand in glove to work remotely on an impenetrable skull. A landrace cross, a market garden run to seed, frocks its purple. Hands tremble round a shaky radial orbit. Petals moths linger on, befalling over sweet heads going sere. Pull the remote hands out of their cross-chirrup antiphon. So what will jolt free the voice block? Stipulate the morning ruffle, break into song, below keep company between points. Time of day is dragging through articulate trees in timed sectors, each a block starlings tumble out of, carved for a chord with fleet fingers, ribboned like the bands over an astrolabe, throwing V-shaped shadows, harrowing its skin-deep sense. Worked one August there, legendary nights, then fell off the map. Of course I managed well, he was coach, he showed me I was okay. Hearing nothing later, I gave up. Did the harbinger just up sticks too? Volumes collapse, such as a thumbed wasabi sachet or a reddening lump marks. Sempiternal cut that, sky of sky of sky. Nail, sky of sky of sky. Scalp fontanelle. 8. Pain about the ankle was but metacarpal returning to the fold. This other, budding output, what would you be doing? The best of it was prepared. No matter how you fall or where you post your valiant shoreline, the union of pattern makers stands on its mettle. None of that would count were it not for you. It must continue. The objects want their pockets and their felt linings, but their bulkiness brings the inconceivability of air swinging free of hinges of the one fastening, battening its joys, imbuing that squall neither one can reach through for a second. 9. In sphering air will swaddle the defenceless, on one slope, cheek press. Under stems of rain, the open valve field quivers, rankled emptiness, tap its rim. The face once applied finds out hollows and would funnel through vacancies. Bloody clouds numbered like days ratchet down from Parnassus, then splurge over a stool. What is this stuff? I do not bend to pick up, I do not check every pass, having been stacked neatly and then staged beside a hedge of longitudinal seedlings, a backdrop of wavelets or of harrowed soil. This is nothing more or less, composited with no face, with no eye to futurity but a set of ploughed cancellations. Neither will its blades be lifted, self-bracketing, self-haloing, possibly its light issued from a star that never wert, or if it were, struck out. How shall zinc analogues level? Where shall stakes be driven? Unless the gatekeeper gives his all-clear abduct zincoing. Privet blocks the parterre, a grid bees get bearings by, gloss and matte checkerboard, puffs its starry sperm smell, bees homing combative the wild dip reporting swallows, paced over ripples, contouring air. I cannot specify their pitch. Digits through their pipes and cartilage, siphon thunder squalls. What kind of fuckery is this? Issuing dispatch orders, haloing self, that being so, dilapidated coup part slew of Parnassian strings. Hoot through turbulence, combing air, swirl of birdsong turbine chopped, sphinctering, that thing, that thing, that thing. Children lunge for goodies on the organ track. Clouds edged in pink rust get hung on puce-ruled and barometric wind. I have to say without stint. Birds grip acoustic wires, shaping up in genera, bunch in subfamilies. Such was the premise on which I worked. Colour tagged. Mercator net crackles crap orders. From his dais the soloist shoots tongue, a straight ridge is cleared. Across his brow, air shrinks, convulsive as it channels through an FX box, as reverb buffets cages, skewing songs tuned to Berber villages, Atlas mountain clefts, readings flash from beam scales. The table of the hand swipes and plunges at tumbler LEDs. Down the blue screen they are dripping disjunct, imaginary lure. A swaying tree outflanked a gerundive manifest, a ruched skirt. Flushed and swollen cheek of cloud soon dissolves. Miscellaneous birds spray, unfledge. A black chandelier pelts down glass. nor could I find light within to make a figure out against. 10. The lumpish scale whelms, a divider, a peewit, limbs an extraction site, as if mourning earth in its gaping. Global courses hook tight, twist round the bird's keening, stretch out bands whose seeds strewn for nurture on Japan's surfaces, rattle cages in ether, outriders for an inflatable's wobbling. If courses of events fail to tune the clamour, substitute, pale shoots extend, loose fibres tucked into congruity, engineered in portakabins trashed during disturbances. Hanging low above the farms, a nucleus enfolding drops and yaws, asphalt bruised by wires sparking. What separation spread flock ratio? Residual density of flock comes on song beneath its auspices, airflows that coagulate, dropping grey dishevelled birds in clouds. A captive wren falls, sky shatters in a whirl of powder blue smolts, tongues fit into slots hinging fluidly, and gulls wheel apart. What is this gunge crusting on outcrops while night presses close? Shuttered though it is, shuttered and bolt, stuff shook along the grading tray, sluiced with weak acid, depositing grey lumps that accumulate as wealth, deadening the signals, choking arteries. There is a humming overhead. Dust settles. Tongues cosset, corrugate, bill and coo. Stock-packed depths circumfuse, allure through shades disconsonant, wings stir. Ring through telluric mass whose deposits seem to stir. Thought-stirring bulges the vesicles are thinking through, strains against sutures, colonies of thought cellulate, veins once perfused clip off. Gulls at market plunge into negative. Spallation products smash into the void. Lattice work of gunge, thought stirs in this, teats go branch to monitors, dust bonds in venous tracts, blockage swells, impedance racks up. Hear that lonesome train whistle, kissing gate shriek. Breathers rally by the gate and lose heart. No compassion helps. Desperate fingers and ligatures pinch unproductive nubs. Curlews keen at the perimeter. A mother's breast won't slake, processing pain like a meal of it fattens like thought. A door gives. The aspirator coughs. The gatekeeper, stricken, slams his door back and forth on vacancy, cycles through a deck of defunct views. One devouring view claims the spread foreground, centre stage. On a turntable, the kneeling detainee sings and calls up the gases. Liberty, oh liberty. Winks his only temporality, beaten flat in a leaden plate above her. To be swept, light, diamond trash. The sun's intermediacy involves and repeats itself. A row of marigolds in time-lapse bends east, moths sink below, coalescence. Prized apart, clouds clap thunderous in the biomass. The signature of each bee and each flower shifts orbit, so not touching, so is called lapwing. Distance would become an intensifier. Magnetic bands launch birds in due rankings. Here goes. Not having been born sails into its trammels. Cloth gets thrown over its every cage. So now a short poem called Roundabout. This is the envoy to my forthcoming book, Reckitt's Blue. And it's slightly in the idiom of one of my favourite poets, Barbara Guest. Roundabout. And it's sort of all-purpose poetic envoy, so it'll do for today. Roundabout. Trumpet blower, own trumpet blower. Holloway. At the roundabout, why, look in the rear view. A bunch sways all juicy-like. At the island, sea lanes interrupt, sprig pinned. Waves become chaotic, promised showcase, but in the rear, bunch torrent nevermore postpones. Lorries spill loads. Smash and grab. Through phosphorescent shoals, a star punched into the plate all bloody-like. Spawns one's order that goes, a hook lowered while its block bulb sets. Manifests in the form of a lizard. Hauliers whose lined up bone, the making of them, blue-yellow, sheets and shadow monolith, blue-yellow doings, air, hiss, Hauliers clutch sandwich, lath for signposts, soon beset bridges sway. Sheets of bleached pith hang from buttress roots, hammered, blink or not, storms, breaks lumpish, tailbacks, despumates with yellow taint. Why do the men, wrapped in whitening smacks, shake the whitening hand? Get in, booms shudder. Links litter boundless sand. Vegging out, serrated, bluing yellow-white, hauliers on break riffle, ply rubber thimbles, turn up their object armada. The swell had made pronouncement. Dagger spines broke, put up, disowned trumpet. Rolled across the truck plaza. Ears had pounded, then lurched inside, stuck his wad like that. Is someone here about to see to me? Slicked in phosphorescence. Mould creeps along the margin. Is that foaming at the mouth? Thank you.
Thank you, John Wilkinson. Thank you, Keston Sutherland. Thanks, Maud. Thanks, Jeffrey, for the introduction. There are some books available for you to look at and purchase if you're interested. The Cal Bookstore is going to take care of the sales. The two books on this end, the two titles by John Wilkinson, were shipped here for us to sell, the English department, and they are $10 each. And then the other volumes, which is a volume by Keston Sutherland and another of John Wilkinson's books, the Cal Bookstore is selling through under their auspices. But she's going to take care of your money. All right, thanks a lot, all of you, for coming. I hope that many of you can come for all or at least part of tomorrow. Don't be hesitant to drift in and out. I know that many of you have other obligations like classes, for example, and jobs. But just be quiet when you come in and hang out for as much as you can. Okay, good night.